Hey guys, welcome to the channel. As you see in the thumbnail, what if Naruto have lots of relationship with every woman of My Little Pony? Before I start, please do support for more awesome content, and subscribe my channel and like this video. Go support and follow the Moretsuna Sora for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story. Link in the description. Kurama furrowed his brow in frustration as this wasn't how it was supposed to go. Naruto and the Uchiha had finally sealed up Kagaya in another Chibaku Tensei. But then things went south as she, in one last bit of revenge before being fully sealed away, dragged both Naruto and Sasuke into the pitch-black void that not only knocked them out instantly but was seemingly tearing up Naruto's body. "I'm not going to let you die like this, kid. I don't care if I erase this half of myself, I am not about to let you die after everything you have done for us," Kurama roared as he pushed his energy through Naruto to heal up the wounds almost as quickly as they popped up. "Kurama, let us help you," Matatabi said as she and the other Bijou couldn't stand by and watch the boy who had helped free them, befriended them, and fought for them suffer like this. "Then find a way out of here. The sooner he is out, the sooner he is safe. After you set us on a path, I want you all to let yourselves be pulled back to your other halves," Kurama said as the other Bijou widened their eyes at him. "You aren't coming with us?" Son Goku asked while Kurama shook his head. "I'm staying with the kid until I know he is safe, even if there is only a tiny bit of myself still alive when this is over. I will let my last bit go back the second I see him leave this place still intact," Kurama said in a tone that the others knew there was no use trying to talk him out of it. "You heard our brother. Now find a way out. I doubt we'll get him back to his original world, but anywhere is better than this. Do it fast, as at the rate Naruto is being torn apart, Kurama won't be able to last much longer," Gyuki said as the others pooled their energies and started to search and make Naruto drift through the completely black void. Kurama could feel his consciousness fading as his chakra was getting much too low, but he continued to heal Naruto before he noticed a rip open up in front of the path they had Naruto drifting towards. "We found somewhere, brother. We don't know where it goes, but it's somewhere out of here," Gyuki said as the others looked towards Kurama, worried as the fox's body started to get dangerously skinny at the low amount of chakra he had left. "Thank you, now leave," Kurama said as Gyuki put his hand on Kurama's shoulder before the fox shoved him away. "I said leave. I have to make sure he gets through safe, and I don't want you all being stuck." "I'm fine with fading, but I don't want you all to go down with me," Kurama said as Koko tried to speak up onto Gyuki to send her a let him be look that only made her and the others frown more. "We will see you again, brother, but not this half of you. We will still miss you nonetheless, and we will make sure father saves the others from the illusion," Gyuki said as each of the Bijou patted Kurama on his back, lending him the little bits of chakra they could offer while still keeping enough to protect them on the way back. "Keep the kid safe, he's done a lot for us. I hope wherever this takes him he is happy. He deserves it," Son Goku said as the others nodded, and one by one they faded away, leaving Kurama to be the last one in Naruto's seal. Kurama let out a low chuckle as Naruto drifted closer to the rift. "Thank you for everything you've done for us kids, since because of you we are free. You fulfilled your promise. I'm just sorry you couldn't live peacefully in your world. Hopefully this one is good for you," Kurama said as he braced himself before pouring, in one full burst, all of his and the bits of his siblings' chakra into every bit of Naruto to the cellular level to keep him safe as he entered the rip. "Stay safe," Kurama muttered as he faded from the seal just as the rip closed behind Naruto. Naruto, as he fell from the sky, was surrounded by a golden sphere of energy before he landed in a dense forest with a loud crash that the dome took the force of to keep him safe. The forest almost seemed to move towards him as various trees around the dome shifted and melded together with roots that burst out from the ground below it until a massive tree stood up taller than any other tree and cocooned the dome. Canterlot. When she first woke up this morning, Celestia, the princess of Equestria, thought it was going to be another normal and boring day of royal duties, and for the most part it did until she felt something powerful break into the world in the direction of Ponyville. "Princess! Princess!" A familiar voice yelled as a purple unicorn burst into the hallway before she noticed her there and ran towards her. "Did you feel that just now?" she asked as Celestia nodded. "Yes, my dear student Twilight, I did, and I think I personally need to go and investigate this occurrence," Celestia said with a frown as she could feel the power radiating from here, and the major thing that worried her was that it felt on her level. "Stay here and I will be back soon, hopefully," Celestia told her student as Twilight nodded and watched as she left. "Shining armor, gather my guards, fastest flyers. We are heading to Ponyville, Celestia said as Shining Armor nodded and saluted before signaling the guards with his magic before 10 Pegasi landed, 5 on both sides of them. Stay on guard while I am away, Shining Armor. I will hopefully be back soon, Celestia said before she and the guards took off in the direction of the energy she could feel. It didn't take her long to realize it was coming from the massive tree in the Everfree forest. As she tentatively landed, her guards flanking her, she found the energy around the tree to be peaceful. Honestly, to her it felt like pure nature was radiating off the tree, and by the hordes of birds and animals gathering around the tree it showed she wasn't the only one being put at ease by it. Is the tree dangerous, Princess? The captain of her Pegasus guards asked as Celestia shook her head. I wouldn't say it is dangerous, but I would like to station guards here and put a barrier around it in case unsavory characters try to do anything with it. I want to be alerted the moment any changes happen with it, Celestia said as the guards saluted to her while her eyes were still locked on the tree. She might not feel anything malicious in it, but that didn't mean she wouldn't be cautious about it. Despite the feeling it gave her that it would change things for the better, she was still nervous about it but decided whatever came of it she'd deal with it then. A few months later. Naruto groaned as all the muscles in his body felt like they were on fire, and he had been crushed under Gamakichi. As he opened his eyes he was quickly confused as he found himself a massive hollowed-out tree. Where am I? He wondered before he widened his eyes and quickly looked around. Wait, Kagaya. I remember finishing her off, but what happened next? He thought as he tried to stand up only for his body to feel off, unaware why until he looked down at his arms which quickly made him widen his eyes. Wait, I have fur? Naruto asked out loud as his arms looked like Kurama's only with a lighter orange color to them. The further he looked around at his body the more confused and shocked he became as he noticed his body was that of Kurama's in makeup with 9 tails billowing behind him to even the long ears on top of his head. The only difference was that he seemingly had more fur on the top of his head to resemble his spiky hair of sorts with 2 spiky bangs hanging down the sides of his face. Kurama? Are you and the others still there? Naruto asked as he tried to talk to them like he always did only for there to be no response, and he didn't feel any of the bijou him. I know we won, so did they maybe get pulled out of me by the sage? If so, then where the hell am I? He wondered before he decided the only way he'd get answers was by leaving whatever tree he found himself in. I still have chakra, but it feels off, so for getting out better keep this simple, Naruto thought as he clenched his fist and punched through the trunk before he started to pull at it and tear off pieces off the wall until a doorway his size was made for him to leave out of. Halt! Stay where you are! A voice ordered out before he looked over to see it came from a winged horse clad in golden armor while 4 others stood beside them. Am I in some sort of odd summon realm, cause I swear those are not how normal horses look, Naruto thought as they looked much more cute if he had to describe them in any way. He was a bit taken aback as a large white horse landed behind them as this horse was the size of him with a long blue, green, and glittery mane. She, like the horse in the armor, had wings, but unlike the armor one hers were much larger, and she had a long white horn. The horse wore a golden necklace around her neck and a golden crown on top of her head right above her horn as her purple eyes looked him over. At ease, Captain, for now, the horse said as she briefly looked over at the armor-wearing horse before looking at him with a kind smile. I am sorry for my captain, as she was just following orders to keep whatever came out of your tree from leaving until I arrived. My name is Princess Celestia. May I ask your name? Celestia asked as Naruto nodded, trying to take a step out of his tree before he fell down with a groan. Ugh, stupid weird hind legs, he groaned out before he pushed himself back up with his arms. Sorry, legs are asleep. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, he introduced as looked at her, and held out a hand towards Celestia only to frown as he forgot they were horses and set it back down on the ground. Well, Naruto, it is nice to meet you, but can you tell me how you arrived here and the cause of the tree? She asked as Naruto frowned and rubbed the back of his head a bit. I felt you enter this world, and since then I figure you have been sleeping in hibernation in this tree, she added, making Naruto frown a bit more at the enter this world comment. Well, the thing is that I don't quite remember. I just woke up and last I remembered I was fighting a goddess. Everything that happened after is blank, Naruto said as he kept the fact that he used to be human and anything about the bijou a secret for now. Honestly, I'm just shocked at things since my world had horses, but they definitely look different, Naruto said as Celestia chuckled. We are called ponies here. Those ponies with wings are called Pegasus, ones with horns are unicorns, and those with either are earth ponies, she explained as Naruto rose an eyebrow at her. And what are you called? I mean, you are quite bigger than the others, he said before one of the guards beside her stepped forward. Be respectful when talking to our princess like that. They yelled, their wings spread out before Naruto frowned before they watched him sit up until he was to Celestia's height. They already knew he was large, the guards only measuring up to his. But as he fully sat up, he was much larger than they expected. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to sound bad. I was just genuinely curious, he said as he stretched his back a bit, his muscles still being sore, but figured sitting upright was better than being hunched over. That is fine, it is quite alright, Celestia said in a calming tone that eased the Pegasus' annoyance away. I am an alicorn, although a special one, as due to my domain I am immortal. Normal alicorns have attributes of all 3 pony classes and are rare as there are only 3 around, myself included, and all 3 are princesses, she said as she understood he wasn't of this world, so all of this was very new to him. Are there other foxes here? Naruto asked as he was pretty sure there weren't, given the odd looks he had gotten from the Pegasi when he first left the tree. Not that I know of, but there could be. For now, would you be against coming back with me to Canterlot, as there are things we need to still discuss, and I feel it might be better to talk in my castle instead of out here in the forest, she said before he nodded with a bit of a frown. I'm fine with it, but my legs are pretty sore, so is it close by? He asked before Celestia smiled and waved her hoof at him. I can summon a carriage to take us to Canterlot, so don't worry, she said as he watched her horn glow, and a large enclosed carriage materialized behind her before its door opened for them. And don't worry, I can help you walk since you seem to be sore, Celestia added, as she noticed him limp forward only to almost fall until she surrounded him in her magic and gently helped him onto the carriage. Stay on guard around the tree until we return the next day. Also, it goes without saying not to mention this to anyone, Celestia said as the guard saluted her before she closed the carriage door behind her. Thanks, my legs are not working too well right now, Naruto said as Celestia sat down on one side of the carriage before the Pegasus guards pulling it took off into the sky. That is fine, I expect you are not used to your body? Celestia said, smirking as she noticed a slight flinch from Naruto. Do not worry, I will not ask if you are not willing to tell, but no, I will offer help if you need it, she added as he nodded. I've had a body like this somewhat before, but it was different. This might take a while, but at least I have hands, he joked as opened and closed his hands. I have seen foxes before, but you are definitely the first with hands like that, and with that many tails. When I felt you enter this world, I felt your power, but I am glad you seem to be peaceful, she said with a smile, making Naruto chuckle as he looked outside the carriage window to see the massive castle that was getting larger as they got closer. Is that your castle? He asked as Celestia nodded. Yes, and you don't have to worry about anyone seeing you right now, as the guards up front will land us near the throne room so we can talk more, Celestia said as the carriage started to fly lower to properly land in the throne room. Guards, absolutely no one is to bother us while we are in here. If they need to talk, tell them they can wait until this morning. Also prepare a room for him to stay in for the night nearby, Celestia said as the guards saluted to her while she stepped out of the carriage. She was about to help Naruto out before he waved her off, since he knew he had to learn how to move around eventually. Please sit wherever you like, as there is much to talk about, Celestia said as she walked up to her throne, watching with a chuckle as Naruto wobbled a bit as he walked out of the carriage that quickly disappeared once he was out of it. First though, as ruler of Equestria, I must ask what might be your intentions, as if you plan to be a danger to the inhabitants I will have to deal with you personally, she warned as she threw open her wings and summoned her magic to put some backing in her threat. Naruto was a bit stunned as the weight of Celestia's power instantly reminded him of Kaguya, as he also swore the room just got incredibly hotter, the heat radiating off Celestia before he held up his hands. I don't plan to be a danger, honestly. Back in my home before I wound up here, I was fighting against a villain who was trying to put the world under a mass illusion, so I think my alignment is pretty good, he said as the heat basically vanished instantly, and Celestia tucked back in her wings with a smile. Oh, then I see no danger in you, and I am sorry, but I had to find out before telling you about my land, Celestia said as he waved it off. I understand, since I am someone new and all, Naruto said with a slight chuckle as he instantly made a mental note not to piss off Celestia, since he figured the sun on her wasn't only for show. As the night went, Celestia did her best to tell Naruto the basics of Equestria and how things went along in it, from cutie marks to currency, and even magic, while Naruto told her about what had happened prior to his arrival here, his world, and their magic called chakra, which interested her a bit. He did though keep his human nature and the bijou a secret, as he felt those should be saved for much later. They continued to talk throughout the night before she realized just how late it had become. We should probably stop now as it is getting rather late. We may continue tomorrow as I have something in mind that might help you become more acclimated, Celestia said as she stood up, and Naruto frowned, a bit confused, but nodded as he stretched a bit. If you say so. I don't know how well I'll be able to sleep, but I might as well, Naruto said as he stood up, finding it slightly easier to walk now that his muscles had stopped hurting. Guards, please show Naruto to his room for me please, as I have things to prepare for tomorrow, Celestia said as 2 guards saluted her and stood in front of Naruto. Right this way, sir, one of them said as Naruto nodded and followed after them. Once out of the throne room, Celestia let out a slight sigh at the work ahead of her before she could lay down, but she knew she wanted to help Naruto after being thrown into this world, so it was the least she could do. Of course, she'd still keep an eye on him until she was fully sure he wasn't a danger, but she felt like he wasn't a real danger. She might have only his word on it, but he didn't give off any feeling of a threat, but as ruler she still had to be careful. Naruto frowned as the door closed behind him before he made his way over to the bed and sat up on it. Okay, so I'm in an entirely new world full of talking horses that like to be called ponies. At least I'm alive, he thought with a sigh before he moved his hand down to his stomach. But I'm all alone, he added as he could feel the Biju's energy in him, but he couldn't feel them. I hope they are just safe back home and everyone else was able to get out of the illusion, he thought before he shook his head and stood back up off the bed. I can't get all mopey like that. I'm sure the sage helped them or something. They are safe and so am I. I doubt I'll be able to ever return home, but that doesn't mean I can't make a life here though. First things first, I need to practice moving this new body around, he thought as he looked at himself and his tails. Grateful that the room Celestia put him in was rather large so that he could move around without being cramped. Next morning, Celestia smiled as she watched Naruto enter her large dining room, which was empty at this time in the morning, without nearly as much trouble as he had last night. I hope you slept well, since apparently there were reports of a lot of bumping and crashing around the area of your room. You wouldn't happen to know the cause, would you? She asked with a smirk before he rolled his eyes. Yeah, very funny. I was just having a bit of difficulty with my tails as they are harder to control than I thought they'd be. You're lucky you have one, as keeping balance with 9 is really difficult, he said as Celestia chuckled and nodded. Well, I am happy to see you are getting the hang of your new body. I couldn't imagine how that must be, but you seem to be taking it well, she said as he sat down at one of the seats before she levitated some food over to him. I don't know what your diet is, so I hope you are okay with our food, Celestia said as Naruto looked over to see foods like pancakes, hash browns, and other regular breakfast food besides the lack of bacon. But then again, he figured with them being horses he doubted that they would eat stuff like that. Yeah, this works, but, just curious, ponies don't eat meat, do they? He asked as Celestia shook her head. Pegasi are known to eat fish sometimes due to their need for protein to keep their wings strong, but other than that no pony really eats meat, Celestia said as Naruto shrugged his shoulders as he was fine with fish before he picked up the silverware and started to eat. So what's the plan for today? Naruto asked as he looked towards Celestia, who frowned and made her cup of tea float back down to the table. That is all up to you, Naruto, and where you would like to stay. You are free to live here in the castle with me and the other inhabitants if you like, or we can find you better living situations, as I understand not every pony is suited for life in Canterlot, Celestia said as Naruto rubbed the back of his neck with a frown. As much as I am thankful for the offer to stay here, I think somewhere smaller might be better. There are way too many negative emotions here, and somewhere smaller and less royal might be best, he said while Celestia nodded, him having brought up his ability to sense negative emotions last night when he brought up his chakra. I figured you might say something like that, which is why, after breakfast, we will be heading to just the town that I feel will be perfect for you so you can get integrated with pony culture as well as meet new people and make new friends. I already notified the mayor of the town early this morning and got a quick reply back, so they are expecting us, Celestia said as Naruto rose an eyebrow, a bit worried how other ponies might react to him as the guards so far tended to be a bit jumpy around him. Don't worry, the ponies there are very accepting, plus since your tree is nearby that town we will be able to make excuses for most of the things you will be there to learn, she said as levitated back up her cup of tea to drink from as Naruto decided he might as well finish the food before they had to leave. The actual ride to the town was a bit quicker than the ride from the tree to the castle, but as he looked out of the window he was able to see the town below. Most of the houses looked like straw-roofed cottage with a large building in the center of it all. As the carriage landed he backed a bit away from the window as he could see somewhat of a crowd waiting outside for them. Do not worry, I told the mayor you were different, and a fox but not dangerous, so I hope that'll help, Celestia said as the carriage door opened and she stepped out before looking back to encourage him to follow. Naruto paused for a bit in the carriage before letting out a sigh and following after Celestia. He wasn't ashamed of what he was, since in all honesty he'd rather be a fox like Kurama instead of a pony, as he figured the lack of hands would get to him. His nervousness more stemmed from this all being a new world to him, and new people that he'd have to win over again. Oh my, when Princess Celestia said you were a fox I didn't think you'd be that large, or have that many tails, a gray-maned mare said as she pushed up the glasses on the end of her snout up a bit. The mare had blue eyes with a two-toned gray short mane with a matching normal length tail. Her coat was a tannish color, as she wore a white shirt collar with a green handkerchief tied in it. Her cutie mark seemed to be a piece of paper rolled up and tied with a teal ribbon. On behalf of the ponies in Ponyville, I, Mayor Mare, would like to welcome you to our town, Mayor Mare said as she motioned to the Welcome to Ponyville banner above them, while the ponies cheered behind her. Thank you, this means a lot, Naruto said with a slight smile, being careful of showing his fangs as he didn't know how the others would react. This here is Naruto Uzumaki. For most of his life he's lived in the Everfree Forest alone until he created the massive tree that sprouted up a few months ago as home. When my guard showed up he stayed hidden, but when I came to check I felt him in there and I coaxed him out gently. He is new to ponies, having never seen any enter far enough in to find him until now, so I hope you welcome him warmly, Celestia said as Naruto was impressed by the excuse she created to hide everything about him for now. Oh my gosh! I've never seen a fox like you before, a pony said in a very soft but excited voice as Naruto looked down to see who it was. The pony teal-colored eyes and had a long mane that curled at the end and a matching tail that was a bit longer. Her coat was a pale gold and her cutie mark was 3 earthlies. He was a bit confused as she kept circling around him and even went as far as to pet his tails, which made him feel odd until he made them move away from her. Oh sorry, they just look so soft. I'm Fluttershy. It's really nice to meet you, Fluttershy said as she looked up at him with stars in her eyes. I'm sorry about that. Fluttershy is our animal expert, and I thought having her alongside might help make sure you are comfortable here, Mayor Mare said as Naruto nodded. It's really okay. I was just surprised as that's the first time someone's touched my tails, that's all. It's nice to meet you though, Naruto said as he held out his hand towards Fluttershy, who put her hoof in it and let him shake it. Well, I must be off, but I will be in contact with you, Naruto, later, as I need to relieve my guards from defending your tree, Celestia said to him before she turned to Mayor Mare, and as always it was a to visit pony, she added as the mayor smiled with a light blush and bowed before Celestia walked back into the carriage that started to drive towards the Everfree Forest. How about a tour of Ponyville, and then we can find you somewhere to live and maybe work, since Princess Celestia said to help show you a pony's way of life. You don't mind that, do you? Mayor Mare asked as he shook his head. I'm totally fine with helping out around town where it's needed, Naruto said as Mayor Mare smiled up at him before she, and a crowd of other curious ponies that stuck back a bit further behind them, walked through town. I have to say I didn't know there were foxes like you living in the Everfree Forest. Have you met any others of your race? Fluttershy asked as Naruto shook his head with a frown. Been alone for as long as I can remember, so I don't know, but I don't think there are. Honestly, I'm just glad Princess Celestia found me, Naruto said as he built up on Celestia's cover story. I mean, your paws aren't like any paws I have ever seen, and your ears are more like a rabbit's. Plus you have so many long tails, Fluttershy gushed before she embarrassing covered her mouth once she realized she had been babbling a bit. I'm sorry, you just are so unique, she said before he waved her off with a chuckle. Yeah, I guess I am a rather odd fox. I mean, instead of paws I have hands and my ears are rather odd, but I'm glad a pretty pony like you seem to like how I look, Naruto said as he did like her hair while he moved one of his tails over to pet her head, quickly making the Pegasus blush at the compliment for the magnificent creature before her. You call your paws hands? How quaint, Mayor Mare said with a smile as Celestia had told him ahead of time how no other pony besides her, and a very select others, have actually seen hands. He merely chuckled as they made their way further into Ponyville. Honestly, from what the mayor showed him, he liked the little town. Everyone seemed friendly enough, although a few acted a bit scared around him. The majority seemed to be either interested in him, or okay with him. Oh my goodness, is that your natural coat? A female voice asked before a measuring tape held up by magic started to measure parts of him. The female pony was a unicorn with blue eyes and a very curly purple mane and tail. Her coat was a light gray, almost white, with her cutie mark being 3 light blue diamond-shaped gems. I have to say it's such a lovely shade of orange. Orange is such a hard color to find a good shade in. Too dark and it's musty, and too bright it hurts your eyes, but yours is splendid, darling, the unicorn said as Mare chuckled. Rarity meet Naruto Uzumaki. He arrived not too long ago with Princess Celestia. Rarity here is Ponyville's best seamstress, and as you can see she takes it seriously, Mare said as Naruto chuckled and held his hand out to the unicorn. Nice to meet you, Rarity. I'm glad you like my fur, he said as Rarity looked at his hand before getting stars in her eyes. My goodness, darling, your nails are exquisite. They are such a graceful natural point, and such a sleek shade of black. And your paws, hands, Rarity started to say before Mare corrected her, making Rarity raise an eyebrow at before shrugging and going back to his hands. Well, your hands are simply something I haven't seen, but I can feel they'd be great for helping me out, she said before Mare chuckled. We'll add your place to one of the possible jobs for him, Rarity. If you want, you may come along and join the crowd for his tour through Ponyville, Mare said as Rarity frowned and looked back into her shop before nodding. My work can wait a while, since it isn't every day a marvelous creature like this moves into town. I must come along so he knows the perfect shops to buy care products to keep his coat magnificent, she said as she stepped out of her shop, turned the sign to closed, and stepped to his left since Fluttershy was staying close to his right side. Well then, on we go, Rarity said with a smile up at him, and Mare nodded with a chuckle and continued on before the sound of fast rolling wheels made them stop as they neared the market. Runaway wagon of apples! Look out! A voice yelled as Naruto looked to his left to see a massive wagon barreling down the street towards them. He quickly held out his hands to catch the wagon before hoping he could control his tails enough to help. Thankfully, the practice last night was enough to help, as his tails helped grab the wagon with his hands to immediately make it stop its crash course without anything it being damaged. Rarity couldn't help but stare as she and Fluttershy watched Naruto stand up on his hind legs to catch the wagon, both impressed with how he could stand up like that. Rarity, though, having the sharper eye of the two Mares, was also quick to notice how his muscles flexed as he carefully but with enough strength to keep them from danger. Oh my, how dashing of you to save us like that, Rarity said with a smile as Fluttershy nodded with a thankful smile. Whew, that was close, thanks partner, a cowboy hat-wearing pony said as she rushed over to them with a smile. The pony lacked any horn or wings, with green eyes and a dull blonde mane and tail, both of which had a red hair tie at the end to make a, pun unintended, ponytail. Her coat was a warm shade of orange with a few blonde freckles on her cheeks. Her cutie mark was 3 red apples. I do have to say it is mighty impressive how you saved my wagon so easily like that. Normally only my brother can really stop it when it gets out of control. Plus you even saved everything in it, which really saves me, as that's everything we had to sell today, the pony said as she trotted up to him. The name is Applejack. Here, have one of my family's products, says thanks for saving it all like that, Applejack said as she rummaged around in her wagon before tossing him a shiny red apple that one of his tails quickly caught. My, those tails are pretty handy, aren't they? I bet you could harvest a lot of apple trees with them, Applejack said as Mare nodded with a smile. We will add you family's acres to possible jobs for him. We are just giving Naruto here a tour of Ponyville first before we help him figure out where to live and work at, she said as Applejack looked away from Naruto and nodded at the mayor. I heard about the princess coming to town to introduce some pony, but I really couldn't show up since I had to get our stuff ready to sell. Nice that I was still able to meet you, Applejack said as she tilted her hat at him with a smile. Wait, you know the princess? Rarity asked as Naruto nodded with a bit of a frown. Yes, she brought me to town, and I even got to stay in the castle for a night before coming here. Mare mentioned her when she introduced you to me, didn't she? He said as Mare nodded before Rarity blushed. I was probably too focused on your coat. Now I feel foolish, she said as she covered one of her cheeks with her hoof to hide it. Don't worry about it, Rarity. I was the same when he showed up, Fluttershy said with a giggle before Applejack chuckled. As much as I would love to stick around, I really got to get this to the market. My brother is waiting for me. I'll catch you around, Applejack said before she started to pull the wagon off towards the market. I could have saved the wagon too, you know, a female voice said above them before Naruto looked up to see a Pegasus lying on top of a cloud that hovered above them. The Pegasus was rather colorful with reddish-violet eyes, a pale blue coat, and a mane that was like a rainbow, with it having streaks of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. Her cutie mark, from what he could see, was a cloud with a red, yellow, and blue-colored lightning bolt coming out of it. And if I had been there I would have done it so much faster, the Pegasus said as Naruto rose an eyebrow at her. I think he did a very good job in saving us, Rainbow Dash Fluttershy said as Rarity nodded. He was like a knight with how he stepped in front of us to save us. It was very admirable, Rarity said before Rainbow Dash flew off her cloud before stopping in front of Naruto. So you're the one everyone is making a fuss over. I guess you seem pretty cool. Though you'd be cooler if you could fly, she added as Naruto chuckled. Glad you think I'm cool, he said, a little unsure but decided to take it as a compliment of sorts. Well, I got to go clear up the skies. You can come watch some other time since I bet you've never seen it done so fast, she said before she darted off, shooting back into the sky with a rainbow trail being left behind her. My, everybody just seems to be popping up around you, Mare teased, finding it interesting how others kept showing up around them. Now come on, we are nearly done with our tour, Mare said as they nodded and continued to follow her. By the end of the tour, lunch had rolled around and Mare had decided to bring him to a place that looked like a gingerbread house with a cupcake tower rising up from the center of its roof. Welcome to Sugarcube Corner, one of Ponyville's best confectionaries, Mare said as she, Fluttershy, and Rarity, the three that had stuck around till the end, entered the shop before frowning as they saw Naruto was a bit too big for the door. Do you need help, darling? Rarity asked as Naruto shook his head before he squeezed into the door only to fall through as, much to his surprise, he quickly shrunk to a smaller size. Whoa, I didn't know you could become smaller, Fluttershy said with starry eyes at the prospect of learning something new about him. Is this your species' form of magic? She asked as Naruto frowned, looking down at his arms and body before shrugging his shoulders. I guess. I've never done this before, so it is definitely new. I wonder if I leave I'll go back to my normal size, he said before thinking aloud and walking out to find him quickly returning to his previous size. Whoa, that makes fitting you for clothes perfect since you can fit anything, Rarity said with an excited smile which made him chuckle as he came back and shrunk back down and followed them to a nearby table for them to talk to and make an order once they were done. Only if I can learn how to control it, but just so you know I will wear shirts and pants, if they work with my legs. No dresses though, he said as Rarity nodded with a very slight frown that made him roll his eyes at. So how do you like Ponyville so far? Mare asked as he rubbed his chin in thought. It was different than I thought it would be, but in a good way. I actually like it here. It feels nice and calm, he said as Mare looked very happy while Fluttershy and Rarity did as well. So all that needs to be decided is somewhere for you to stay and possibly work at, Mare said as Rarity and Fluttershy were about to speak only for someone to beat them to it. You can always stay and work here. There is a basement underneath, a female voice said as Naruto turned around to see a new pony smiling behind him. This pony was incredibly with light blue eyes. Her mane and tail were a hot color and looked almost like cotton candy, while her coat was a much lighter as her cutie mark were 3 balloons. But this is Ms. Cake's place, so I don't think you can offer her basement to Naruto, Fluttershy said before bounced over to her. She's been looking to rent the basement out, and if he needs a place and somewhere to work, this goes together perfectly. Wait right here, I'll go grab her, said excitedly before darting off before anyone could say anything else. I'm sorry, our friend Pie can be rather hyper, Rarity said as Naruto chuckled as he could definitely see that. Here. This is Naruto, Ms. Cake. He wants to rent the basement out and work for you, said as she excitedly pulled along a female pony. The pony was an earth pony with soft purple eyes and a two-tone mane and tail that both made him think of icing. Her coat was a light cerulean and her cutie mark were 3 cherry-topped cupcakes. She also wore a pair of orb earrings and a yellow apron that covered her only that had frills around the armholes for it. Oh my, Mare, I didn't know you were here, and with a guest? Mrs. Cake said as she looked at Naruto with a smile. I just got finished touring Naruto here through Ponyville after Celestia brought him here, and I figured why not show him one of Ponyville's top confectionaries. We were also talking about possible places for him to work and live when Pie ran off to get you, Mare said with a giggle. Well, the dearie is rather excitable, she said before holding out a hoof to Naruto. It is nice to meet you, Naruto. I am Ms. Cupcake. I run this shop with here helping me out, she said as he shook her hoof. It is very nice to meet you, Ms. Cupcake, and while I am in need of a place to stay and work, I wouldn't want to pressure you into allowing me, he said as Ms. Cake smiled and waved him off with her hoof once he let it go. You don't have to call me my full name. Cup or Ms. Cake is fine, and actually IE is right, I have been looking to rent out my basement, and getting some extra help around the store is always a benefit, especially with your unique hoofs, she said as he smiled. They are called hands, and if you are serious about welcoming me here, then I will be very thankful, Naruto said before Ai cheered and surprised Naruto from hugging him from behind. Yay! New neighbor friend workmate. Ai cheered as the others chuckled, and Naruto turned to Mayor, who smiled at him. I was going to originally offer to let you stay in one of the spare bedrooms at Town Hall, but I do feel this is for the best. As for jobs, I feel your hands will be very useful here, she said as he frowned and rubbed his chin. Actually, I was thinking, could you make me a list of other places in need of help? If I can get back into the rhythm with something I know I can do, I might be able to help out a lot around here, he said as Mayor nodded with a smile. That sounds amazing, as a lot of places do need the help. I'll get back to you right away, but right now I think we should officially celebrate you finding a place to live. Mayor cheered as the others clapped along. Naruto couldn't help but smile as the fear of fitting in and getting used to this world grew less and less the more he stayed around these ponies. He might be in a new world, but he was safe and alive, meaning he could make a new life here, and right now that didn't sound all that bad to him. Naruto chuckled as a sparrow landed on his nose while he sat in Fluttershy's living room. For the last few months he had been spending time with various ponies around Ponyville, and for the most part he has been enjoying himself. All the ponies were incredibly nice, and, after a brief bit of being nervous around him, they welcomed him with open, hooves, and in return he helped them, as after a bit of training he had finally gotten his shadow clones back. It had taken a while, but after some training in Ms. Cake's basement, he got his chakra back in line to use jutsu again to at least the level of shadow clones, walking on water, and the Rasengan. Thankfully the clones only seemed to get more durable in this world as he tested them out, and it took a moderate pummeling to make them dispel, which made them great for helping around. He guessed it was due to the nature energy he could feel absorbing into him naturally, giving all of his clones extra durability. The clones mainly allowed him to help out more around town, from Applejack's farm, Rarity's boutique, to even a few other businesses that were on the list Mayor had given him. Most of the time though he personally helped out with either Ms. Cake, Applejack, or Rarity. Right now though he was having a get-together with Fluttershy that was a rather normal occurrence, since with her cutie Mark had to deal with her ability with animals. She often liked to write down stuff about him that she found out or noticed. Honestly, he was impressed how devoted to animals she was and how smart she was about various animals. So Naruto, how is your ability to control your size? Fluttershy asked before giggling as various birds started to sit down and get comfy on his tails. Pretty good. I've been able to go as small as a colt after visiting the school, and I can even go my full-size houses, Naruto said as he grew up from his pony-size form up to his normal size before shrinking back down once his head got too close to the ceiling. And how good is your control over your tails? She asked before she eeped as a tail not being taken by birds moved over to pet her head, which she leaned into a bit before blushing once he moved his tail away. They are still like sets of extra arms. Very useful for jobs around town, and they can support a lot of weight, so they definitely come in handy, he said as Fluttershy nodded before coughing into her hoof. How well is your progress on regaining control of your magic? Fluttershy asked before she leapt up with a loud squeak as a clone startled her, making her pout before it dispelled. It's going good, same as usual, he said as he picked her up out of the air and pulled her down onto his lap and made her face him as he was sitting with his legs crossed before he pet her head as she continued to pout. I'm sorry for scaring you, but I can't help it since you're pretty adorable when you get scared, he said before he started to scratch behind her ears, quickly making her pout dissolve and a smile replace it. He didn't quite know when it started like this, but recently he found himself holding Fluttershy like this whenever they were alone, as a part of him felt at peace with her in his arms. Maybe had something to do with her cutie Mark skill, but he still wasn't sure. Though you always are cute like this, he mumbled as Fluttershy smiled and nuzzled against his as he rested his head on top of hers with a smile. He frowned a bit though as he buried his nose in her hair, quickly finding himself annoyed as he started to feel a weird gnawing feeling in his. For the last month or so he had started to feel it more, and while it somewhat lessened when he was close like this, but it never fully went away, and being close only helped for so long before it became worse. Fluttershy's blush only grew as Naruto, unaware of what his hands were doing, started to pet her back. She tried to look up at him to try and maybe get him to notice until she had to hold in an eep as she felt his hands press against the space in between her wings, which quickly got her wings to jet out. Naruto continued to pet her wings, still in a daze as she quivered in his arms and let out cute eeps from his hands while she buried her face further in his, which didn't help his daze and neither did her panting. It started to get worse and worse as she continued to let out more eeps and even started to pant into his, her scent being more powerful to him. He frowned a bit as he found him burying his face in the top of her head, his breath now tickling her ears and making them twitch. He honestly would have continued, but as Fluttershy looked up at him, still panting with glossy eyes, it was like dousing his body in cold water, allowing him to quickly set her down and quickly move himself back a bit. "I am sorry there, Fluttershy. I didn't know your wings were sensitive like that," he said, grateful for his orange fur, as if not for it he felt his blush would be visible. Fluttershy blushed a bit as she waved it off with her hoof with a smile. "It's okay, honestly. You still are learning about ponies," Fluttershy said as she noticed a small white rabbit tapping her on the leg with an angry look on its face. "Oh, I'm sorry, Angel, you probably want some lunch," Fluttershy said before various birds started to fly around her. Yes, I'll get to you all. Don't worry," Fluttershy said as she extended her wings for them to land on, while Angel frowned and hoped in between her hind legs and grabbed her tail. "Wait, Angel, what are you doing?" Fluttershy asked worriedly before Angel started to pull her long tail around. The small rabbit was fast as it started looping her tail around and crisscrossing her legs before tying the end of it around her ankle and poking her ankle, causing her to topple over. "Angel, sweetie, please untie me," Fluttershy begged before she rolled over onto her back and started to wiggle in an attempt to get free. Naruto froze as he watched the sight before him, which definitely wasn't helping his situation, as with Fluttershy's tail up and her on her back, everything was in clear view. It hadn't taken long after he moved into town for him to visit the library to learn certain things about the species living around him. This of course meant their biology, as he found himself looking straight at Fluttershy's. His cheeks felt on fire as he stared at her marehood, which looked relatively like the human version, only the area around it to be a darker shade than the rest of her coat. From how little open it was, he figured she was a virgin, while a nub D out at the top of it, making him wonder if him holding and touching her actually had an effect on her. Though that thought quickly flew out his mind, as with the sight before him not much actually thinking was going on. The other part of the view that was putting him in a daze was what could only be described as her S, which in this world were called teats, which were oddly located between a mare's back legs and often hidden by their tail like their marehood would normally be as well. Hers, from what he embarrassingly read under the hinge of a random cult disguise he put together, were rather large for Pegasi. He couldn't really go off cup size since Mara's didn't wear bras, but hers were at least more than a handful for his pony-sized form, when normally they were rather flat due to Pegasi needing to be aerodynamic to fly. He also learned that Earth ponies were rather large while unicorns were somewhere in the middle. But still, that only made Fluttershy's even more stunning since, from the few he had seen flashes of from Earth ponies, hers were still the biggest he had seen so far. They were the same color as her coat, and ped with perky S that D out as her S were squeezed between her legs due to how she was tied up. Honestly, he didn't know how long he had been staring at her exposed parts, but he found himself quickly snapped out of it once the animals around him quickly started acting weird. The ones he knew were males all seemed to back away from him and acted oddly submissive, while the females, all somewhat scooted closer, started to present themselves to him, which made him quickly aware that something was up. It was then he really noticed how hard he had been breathing and actually had been creeping closer towards Fluttershy. He quickly shook his head as he tried to calm himself down, knowing the animals were telling him basically that his pheromones were flaring. This had all mainly started acting up after the first real month he had spent in Ponyville. He figured, as embarrassing as it was at the time, that his new animalistic body was reacting to all the Maras around him. He quickly found out around then that he could smell them and their rather amazing scents, to his new body, with his powerful nose, and when around them too much it quickly sent him into a somewhat animalistic haze. Though before he ever did anything he always found some way to clear his head, with this being the closest he ever got to doing anything, although he never has been able to get fully rid of it, and instead mainly suppresses it. Which only so far has made it continuously pile on whenever it came back up, making each flare-up more and more difficult for him to control himself during. "I got to go, I'll see you later, bye," Naruto said in a rush before he bolted out of Fluttershy's house as fast as he could to get himself away from her, and her scent for now. As Naruto rushed out, Fluttershy's eyes widened and her face grew beet red as she stopped struggling and just realized what position she was in and what was visible in front of her male friend. Angel, somewhat sensing her shock and embarrassment, decided to untie her, which allowed the Pegasus to quickly shoot off and bury herself under one of her living room's comforters. "Oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh!" I can't believe he saw about all of that. I can't leave my house now. Fluttershy whimpered out as she buried her face in a pillow while the animals around her tried her best to console her, hoping she wasn't serious about it. Angel though frowned as he sat on the nearby table, as he only did that to try and help his friend get the mail he knew she liked. Hell, all the animals knew she had a crush on the fox, but they all knew Fluttershy wouldn't make a move. She did have Shy in her name after all. Though maybe he went too far this time. Naruto quickly ran his way through Ponyville, easily able to weave himself through crowds by shrinking himself, hoping to make it back to his room in the basement of the Sugar Cube Corner as fast as possible, as the smell of their sweets often helped mask the smell of Mara's and offer him some faint relief. Thankfully though, as he quickly entered the shop, there were no customers. Though being here didn't mean he was safe either, as sometimes being here was the worst for him, but right now home was better than nothing. "Whoa there pal, where's the rush?" I asked as she jumped out from behind the counter, and quickly captured him in a hug, causing him to go on his hind legs to catch her, as she wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in the crook of his neck. "I missed you while you at Fluttershy's, did you miss me as well?" I asked as she talked into the crook of his neck with a smile evident in her voice. He frowned as he wrapped his arms carefully around her torso, daring not to go further down despite the urge to give an IE's rather plump backside. He also could only nod in response to her question, not really trusting his voice not to sound like a growl. What really was making it difficult for him to stay calm was the fact, due to still being in his pony size, IE's S were pressed up against him while dangerously close to his crotch due to their size. IE's were just barely smaller than Fluttershy's and, from what he could feel right now, incredibly soft. It took everything in him not to get hard from the sensation, or to not slide his hands down to grab her ass. "Yay! You miss me!" She squealed as she nuzzled her face into his neck more before Naruto instinctively buried his face in the crook of her neck as well and inhaled only to smell chocolate more than anything. "You smell really good," he somewhat growled out, slowly moving his nose and mouth up her neck until he got to her cheek before IE smiled and pulled away slowly. "Do I really?" she asked as Naruto nodded, still trying to keep calm as now her face was inches from his. "Yeah, you smell a lot like chocolate, more than normal. It smells really delicious," he said as IE's scent always smelled of sweets that only seemed to strengthen her mere scent, but right now it was much more than normal. He was a bit frozen as with their faces this close, and with him in his haze he felt like he might lean too far forward and possibly the mare in front of him. Something as simple as it easily being enough to push him over the edge and possibly lose it. He was grateful, and a bit frustrated, as IE pulled her head away to smell herself with a giggle. "Oh," she said before she giggled, "that's probably because I was covered in chocolate cake batter a bit ago. It was all over me. I tried to it all off but Ms. Cake made me take a bath," she said with a bit of a pout. "That's a waste of perfectly good chocolate," he growled out, cursing himself as he imagined the mare covered in chocolate. Which definitely wasn't helping. "I know, right? I told her I wanted to eat it or save you some, but she said no," she said with a pout before, much to Naruto's relief, she pulled her arms off from around him. He was also very grateful to Ms. Cake for not allowing a chocolate-covered IE pie to be his first sight, as in this state it wouldn't have helped at all. "So how did your thing with Fluttershy go?" I asked as she bounced around him, making him struggle not to stare as every time she fell down her tail would raise up and basically flash him. Unlike Fluttershy, the S of her marehood were more full and not that much darker than the rest of her coat. That and she had a plumper compared to Fluttershy, which he could see with each bounce. It was a rather amazing and mesmerizing sight, but right now it was making things unbearable. "Things were good. I'm pretty tired, so I'm going to lay down," he said quickly as he tore his eyes away from her and quickly rushed down to his room in the basement, missing the pout on IE's face as she stopped bouncing. He quickly fell onto his bed, burying his face in his pillow as he desperately had to leave. The images of IE bent over the counter of the shop, her plump flank covered in chocolate, that had started to play through his head were way too difficult to keep out of his head around the mare. "Damn alluring Mara's, I really need to just stay away from them for the rest of today," he thought with a sigh. "Today isn't my day," he added before he looked around his room. The basement he lived in was rather large but also spacious, given that he really didn't have anything yet. Right now the only thing in it was a bed big enough to fit his pony-sized self, which was the natural size he took indoors, along with a desk and stool for him to use, and finally a storage trunk that was empty. All in all, it was a pretty good room and very useful for evading the sense of Mara's, as, being the basement there were no windows. Most of the time any scent dissipated by the time it reached him other than IE and Ms. Cake's diluted smells. Maybe a nap will help calm me down, he thought as he closed his eyes and wrapped his tails around him before he passed out from the stressful afternoon. He though found himself woken up by the sound of someone calling for him from above him. Naruto dearie, can you come and help me? IE is off with evening deliveries and I really need the help, Ms. Cake called out as he sighed, still feeling on edge as the nap didn't help, before he crawled out of bed. Coming, Ms. Cake, he called out while making his way up the stairs, only to freeze as he got into the kitchen in the back of the shop to see a view that definitely wasn't helping him. Ms. Cake, as much as he was embarrassed by the fact he stared, had the plumpest flank he had seen so far in Ponyville, to the point her tail did little to cover it up. He figured, never having grabbed it, that it was at least more than a handful with normal size, which was saying a lot how in that size he measured up to Celestia. From just looking at it he definitely knew it wasn't muscular or really toned and instead just pure soft and seemingly enjoyable fat. Especially by how it constantly d with each step she took, which made it that much harder not to stare. It fit the rest of Ms. Cake as she was a bit heavier than most Maras, which made sense given her job, but to him it really worked with her, as he doubted she'd look better skinnier given she would lose not only her ass but probably some of the chub on her stomach. Personally it made her all the more appealing to him. I am here, what do you need help with? Naruto asked as he tore his eyes away from her ass that d each time she pressed down on the dough to knead it. Can you whisk the icing over there for me? I really need it made and put into the fridge for tomorrow, she said with a smile as she pointed to the table behind her before he nodded and slowly walked over to it, his eyes having drifted right back to her rear once he sat down since it was basically right in front of him. He absent-mindedly stirred the icing as for the most part he was struggling between staring and doing his best to try to look anywhere but the jiggling flank in front of him. So far staring was winning and he really didn't like it. Right now he was hating the drawback to his new body and how it recently started to make him feel and act this way. This new animal body coming with animal desires made it really hard to control, as he was having troubles with right now since his eyes were still glued to Ms. Cake's smaller frame and plump ass. So the recipes you gave me, the mochi and dango, are a big hit with the ponies around town. Plus, since my store is the only one that offers them, it's been helping a lot with getting customers, Ms. Cake said with a smile as she looked over her shoulder to see Naruto whisking away at the icing. I'm glad it's helping and that I was actually able to remember the recipes, Naruto said, thankful he was able to tear his eyes away just before she fully turned her head as if he hadn't. Things would have gotten awkward. I've been meaning to ask, how are you handling doing all these jobs around Ponyville? I know you use your magic to make duplicates of yourself, but still I worry about you, dearie, and don't want you running yourself into the ground with your generosity, Ms. Cake said before chuckling as she held her hoof up to her chin. Though from what I hear around town you might have to worry about some single Maras coming your way, since many Maras around have been saying what an eyeful you are. Maras really like how sweet, kind, helpful, and not to mention, exotic you are, since in a small town like this it's charming to them, she added with a smile, chuckling at the groan she could hear behind her, unaware it was one of annoyance and not embarrassment. Naruto right now honestly didn't need Maras trying to put the moves on him since he was having troubles just being around Maras in general right now. Thanks for worrying, but I'm fine since my clones don't wear me down at all, as I've been able to use them since I was a kid. And again, I can make more to help out here if you want, so you can relax more, he said before Ms. Cake gave him a rather adorable pout before putting one of her hooves on her hips, unintentionally making it even more as she turned around. I may be an old mare, but I am still able to do my job. Plus you do so much for me already that I can't ask you to busy yourself like that. It is always sweet that you offer those, she said with a smile before she turned back to the dough and started to absent-mindedly sway her hips, which, with how much her flank was jiggling and swaying, was quickening his breaking point. Honestly, you aren't an old mare. In fact, you are quite the wise and stunning mare, Naruto whispered in her ear as he had made his way towards her until he was right behind her, pressing himself right up against her rear. Lemon start. That and this flank of yours, he said before Ms. Cake could only blush before she let out an eep as he felt his hands grab and squeeze her flank, is by far the most amazing one in town, he finished as he continued to grope and almost knead it like he would dough. So far her ass was just as he expected it to be. It felt incredibly soft, and his hands were just sinking into it as his hands explored the plump blue cheeks of hers. The sound of her squeaks was quickly pushing him along to continue as he wanted to hear more from her. Ms. Cake was surprised and stunned as Naruto groped her flank, trying to speak and say anything to get him to stop, as these sensations were becoming too much for her since she had never felt hands on her before, only knowing what hooves could do. This was all much too powerful for her, as she tried to say something quick only for her to bite her for a second, as she didn't trust herself not to let out a. But as it continued, she knew she had to say something. And Naruto, WEC can't do this. Ms. Cake quivered out, his hands affecting her too much before Naruto chuckled. Are you sure? You haven't exactly been trying to stop me, Naruto said in a much deeper voice than his normal one that made Ms. Cake shiver with a blush. She was in a bit of a daze from it before he surprised her by turning her head to look towards him and capture her essence as he squeezed her flank with vigor. This, as Ms. Cake quickly realized, was no normal she had ever experienced, as his tongue quickly invaded her mouth. She could only widen her eyes and as she felt his long tongue wrap around her tongue and roam around her mouth. Naruto was thoroughly enjoying Ms. Cake's body as he continued to her and play with her ass before he rose his hand up and brought it down to spank the plump rear. The sound of his hand slapping against her incredibly soft flesh was easily enough to get him to break the with Ms. Cake. As he continued to spank her rear, alternating between cheeks, he was mesmerized by how they rippled and each time. And the sound alone was enough to drive him further past the point of no return. Honestly, he couldn't believe just how good feeling her ass and her felt. Her ass alone, the way it felt, was worth everything, and with each second he wanted to enjoy it more. Ms. Cake panted in ecstasy as the left her in a daze before she squeaked as she found herself quickly bent over the counter with Naruto's head near her flank. She didn't get any break as she bit her again to hold in as he basically started to play with her cheeks. Naruto was in a trance as he spread her cheeks apart and mashed them together, causing a satisfying slapping sound to be created. He had heard, from what the books on mating told him, that here was rather bland since there was no foreplay. It was literally just mating in an attempt to breed, and right now he was determined to show Ms. Cake a whole new type. I really can't get over this ass of yours. It feels like heaven and sounds like it too, he said as he spanked it again, causing her to squeak, bury her face on the counter. I mean, every time I spread them apart your tight little asshole twitches and looks so cute, he whispered out as he moved her tail out of the way with one of his to reveal it twitching as it inviting him. He chuckled a bit more as he blew on it, not only making it tighten up, but Ms. Cake let out a quick that she quickly tried to cover up. Oh my, it almost seems like it wants some attention too, he said as he got close to it, making Ms. Cake shiver as she felt his hot breath against it. It's dirty, Ms. Cake stuttered out as he chuckled and shook his head. Trust me, it looks anything but dirty, and I almost feel bad for not showing it love, but it'll get its attention another time, Naruto said before he placed a soft on the tightening hole that made Ms. Cake before her voice started to quiver as she felt his tongue at once. And it definitely isn't dirty, as no part of you dirty at all, my little cup, Naruto said as he gave it one last, enjoying how her eyes seemed to roll back a bit. Not wanting to waste any time, Naruto smiled as he started to up her body, starting with several yes and some s over her slightly reddened cheeks, before he had his way up her back and neck until he was nibbling on her ear. Your body is heaven to me, my little cup, and I see you enjoy it as well, he whispered into her ear before she let out a startled as his hand slid down her back before it ran over her marehood. Naruto couldn't hide his smile as, from what he could feel on his it was starting to become very. Ms. Cake couldn't help but feel so embarrassed and, much to her surprise, turned on as she knew she shouldn't like the feeling of him toying and playing with her body, but she couldn't help it. She knew she should have told him to stop long ago, or even tried to stop him, but after that her body had basically given up on any kind of protest, and everything after that solidified it. Tell me, my little cup, how good am I making you feel? He asked as her eyes went wide as she felt two of his spread the of her marehood open. I bet this is all very new to you since no mare has ever experienced a pair hands before. Tell me, how do they feel? He asked as he moved his hand down, allowing for one to start to rub and lightly her clit. It's clear from how you are soaking my hand that it feels good, but I need to hear it from those tasty of yours, he whispered as her eyes rolled back again as he squeezed her clit in between two and rolled it between them a bit. Oh my, you are absolutely gushing, aren't you, and your knees are quivering. It must feel really good, he added as she jolted her head back as he started to give it a very light tug. That little tug was enough to break Ms. Cake's silence as a very loud and quivering was let out by the blushing bakery owner. She just couldn't hold her in any longer as this all was so new to her. This wasn't any kind of mating she was familiar with, as normally stallions just got on, ed, and finished. All of this though was like he was worshipping her body and devoted to make her feel she had never felt before. And deep down she loved it. Naruto smiled as it was amazing to his ears as he ed on her neck and pulled away from her clit, which caused a whine to escape Ms. Cake's ass. Oh, don't worry, my little cup. Now because you finally let out some noise, the real treat begins, he said as he slowly slid his middle and ring into her marehood, which made Ms. Cake gasp and softly at. Holy cow, aren't you just sopping down there? I can even hear how you are from up here, he whispered as Ms. Cake felt her face heat up even more as even she could hear the noise of his ing in and out of her marehood. And Naruto. Oh, Faust. Ms. Cake ed out as she stretched her front hose straight out as her back legs spread apart, in one part from the and the other to try and make things easier for him. Oh, Faust. Talk to me more, you stud. Tell me how naughty I am. She whined out as she had given up trying to be quiet and wanted more. She knew she was being dirty right now as she was being pleased in this new exotic ways, in her own kitchen, and being bent over her counter on her product all the while she was ing and screaming from it all. And to be honest, she didn't care, and this was even newer to her. She was surprised how she was acting as she didn't know she could be like this, but with everything she was feeling it didn't matter. Right now she was given the opportunity to feel something amazing and she could only fight it for so long before she embraced it. And boy was she going to embrace it. Finally given in and ready to admit to being the naughty filly you are? Your body has been more truthful than you so far, he said as he was happy he had broken her into getting into it before he picked up the speed of his S. He wanted to make her, not only to see how loud she could get but see just how she would get as well, since so far she was absolutely sopping. Don't be quiet, my little cup, let your sounds out like the naughty filly you are, he said before he used his other hand to spank her ass, making her let out a loud. Yes. Spank my flank. I've been such a naughty filly. Ms. Cake ed out as she stuck her ass out further, wiggling it for him to spank while also grinding against his hand. Naruto smiled as he sped up his S, going deeper and harder into her while he continued to spank her ass, which only made her louder. He was loving the sounds of her S as he started to and nibble on her neck and ear before she quickly turned her head towards him. I want another like before, the one where you did that amazing stuff with your tongue. Please. I'm so close, Ms. Cake ed out before it was muffled by him quickly ing her. This time, as Ms. Cake felt his tongue enter her mouth, she decided to try and copy what he did before their tongues fought for dominance in each other's mouths, and she quickly found it even better than before. Naruto, as he enjoyed Ms. Cake's tongue in his mouth, quickly picked up the pace even more. He even started to go as far as making his S grow of her to reach further in, which quickly got a good response from her body as her marehood started to contract around his S. Not wanting to miss this, he broke the and smiled as Ms. Cake's tongue was left hanging out while her eyes started to roll back and she started to pant faster and faster. Oh! Oh! I am Ming! Oh, Faust, I'm Ming! She yelled with a loud before she started to basically scream as her marehood started to gush and squirt all over his hand and the floor below her. He smiled as he helped prolong her a bit, causing her to whine and squirm as she squirted more and more until she laid limp on the counter. Her mind was incredibly blank as the stuck around on her. She personally had never felt this before since, with how simple and fast mating tended to be, and was really only something Maras felt from the best stallion lovers. So for her to feel this, from Naruto's hands alone, was amazing to her. Holy Faust. That was amazing, Ms. Cake said before she widened her eyes as Naruto quickly fed her over onto her back, which confused her as she looked up at him. Oh, my naughty filly, don't think that was it. We aren't done nearly yet, he said as he grabbed her hind legs and spread them apart. A smile quickly grew on as he got his first look at her marehood. The S were darker than the rest of her coat, the S puffy and open with her clit hard at the top from the she just felt, which was still evident from how it continued to twitch while still leaking out juices. Oh my, this just looks delicious, Naruto said as he slowly grew closer to it, enjoying the blush on Ms. Cake's face. Wait. I just came. I need to rest, she said before gasping as she felt his tongue trace up from the bottom of it to the top before he fed her clit with his tongue. As the shot threw her like a jolt of electricity, she was surprised he actually was ing her, as it was unheard of since doing this didn't help with the act of getting a mare pregnant. And yet as his tongue continued to like the S of her marehood, that alone was making her pant and in. Oh my dear little cup, I told you that we aren't done yet. Truly we are just getting started, he said with a chuckle as he pulled back a bit and smiled at her teats. Her S were very light as their size was bigger than IE's but smaller than Fluttershy's. Not wanting to waste the opportunity, he reached out and softly squeezed Ms. Cake's teats, making them air. My, these definitely feel soft. I wonder how they taste? He teased as he leaned down and softly fed one of her S with his tongue. Ms. Cake let out a surprise as she knew teats were just for feeling fulls, and yet, when he had his hands on them and groped them, it felt amazing. As he circled his tongue around her S before capturing one in his mouth, she could only arch her back, which caused them to be pushed against his face more so. Stop, those are for fulls, she had before he pulled away with a smirk, keeping his hands on them as he enjoyed how they felt while he groped them. Then why are you you naughty and perverted filly? Does having me grab and on your teats turn you on? He asked as Ms. Cake looked away and covered her face with her hooves before she nodded slowly. I am a naughty filly, but please don't stop, she said as this all was so amazing to her, and she wanted to experience more and more. That's a good filly, now just lay there, and he said as he continued to grope her teats before he moved his head back down to her still very marehood. Now how about I get a better taste of this, he said as he leaned in and slid his tongue into her marehood S. He didn't waste any more time as the smell alone from being this close made him quickly bury his face in her marehood, sliding his tongue into her as he feverishly started to eat her out. The utterly delicious taste paired with the fact he was drowning in her scent quickly made him black out a bit as his instincts came over him and made him focus on eating out the mare in front of him. Ms. Cake felt like she was going insane as his tails draped her legs over his shoulders while his tongue went absolutely crazy her marehood. This was unheard of to her, as no stallion would ever do something like this, and she was absolutely loving it. Oh Faust! Deeper! Please go deeper! Your tongue is amazing! She screamed out as she pushed herself against him with half-lidded eyes. Keep going! This is so good! I feel like I'm going to again! She panted out as she had little time to rest from her first, and was already feeling another build up in her. Naruto quickly obliged as he felt Ms. Cake press her marehood against him more before making his tongue larger in her, which by the sound of her and the fact she was arching her back, showed it was working. For me, my naughty filly, don't hold it back, he said as he paused for a second before diving back in and eat her out even more passionately while his hands focused on groping her teats and pinching her S. Ms. Cake felt her mind going blank again as she felt it rising higher and higher from everything Naruto was doing to her. Oh! Oh! Oh Faust! I am going to again! She screamed out before she felt Naruto grab her ass and use it to push her against him even closer, which quickly sent her over the edge as she came for the second time tonight. Naruto found the experience very interesting as Ms. Cake squirted on his face and somewhat in his mouth. The flavor and smell of it was intoxicating to him, and the half-conscious look on her face only made him want more. And Naruto, that was amazing, Ms. Cake said with a somewhat drunk tone before she looked over to him only to widen his eyes as he stood up and spread her legs again, and she saw something that made her nervous and at the same time. There, right in between his legs, was his erect member. It looked different to stallions but definitely looked very long and thick, enough so that it made her worry a bit. It all was a dark red color, though was more tapered to a point unlike a stallion, and near the base there was an ever so slight roundness to it. And Naruto dearie, I've twice. I really don't think I can handle a third, she said as her body was too exhausted to move, but she tried to scoot back a bit only to find herself not going anywhere. My dear little cup, this was always the final event, so there is no backing out of it, he said as he brushed the of his member up and down her still soaked S, making the mare shiver and let out a sound that was a mix between a whimper and a "See, you may be worried but your body wants it," Naruto said as he grinded it against her S, making her quiver, and her eyes locked on it as it rubbed against her. Now be a good filly and admit it, he added as she bit her and blushed. I want it, she muttered quietly before he pulled away, making her widen her eyes. Wait. I admit it. I want it, she said, worried it might go away since as much as she was worried about it being too much for her, the larger part wanted it so much that it outweighed her worry. There you go, that's my good little cup, now get ready because I am about to you until you are overflowing, Naruto said with a growl that honestly made her more before she felt the at her S. She could only let out a noise between a gasp and as she felt his long and large member pierce her and collide with her deepest parts. Oh Faust! It feels amazing, I love your. It's hitting my like crazy, she had out before she felt Naruto grab onto her ass and start ing in and out of her. Naruto felt utterly amazing as Ms. Cake's marehood clamped around his member, it being so incredibly warm, soft, and with each he swore it clung to him as if to keep him from leaving and tightened up each time he bottomed out her. If I can reach your and I might impregnate you. You'd love that, wouldn't you? Naruto growled out as he gripped onto her plump ass tightly to use it as leverage to let him faster into her. And no, I can't, she whined out with a, which alongside with her clamping down on him tightly, only made him want it even more as her body wanted it while she weakly protested about it. I know you want it as well, you're as clamping down on me so tight, like it wants me to stay, and he grunted out as he continued to in her, as she looked like she was about to say something back before he quickly fed her back over and spanked her ass hard. I love that you are such a horny slutty mare, but you can't lie like that. You want me to flood you with my hot, don't you? He asked as he continued to, loving the way her ass d with each as well as the sound of it made each time he slammed into it. Admit it, he said as he pulled head back by her hair, that was currently a mess from all the sweating she was doing. Admit that you want me to you. That you want to feel my baby batter turn in your stomach until you are carrying my children, he growled out as Ms. Cake ed and smiled as she was in a daze. I want it so badly. I want to feel it burn my ass, she ed out as she panted and quivered from the repeated assaults of his on her. Just the idea of him impregnating her was enough to bring her closer to him. You have the perfect body for it, as only a mare that loves to be ed from behind could ever have an ass this perfect for it, he grunted as he grabbed her hips and started to pull her back to meet his ass, causing her to let out a gasp as they were both sure he had entered her. He didn't let up as he continued to hard and fast pulling her back each time to meet him, and every time a good portion of his entered her, making her roll her eyes back and drool a bit. You are such a good chubby slut for letting me you until you pass out. Aren't you my little chubby slut, he growled as Ms. Cake nodded dumbly. I'm a chubby slut that wants your. Please, for the love of Faust, give it to me. Ms. Cake ed out as both the room was filled with the constant smacking sounds of his midsection hitting into her plump ass. Say it again. Call yourself my chubby slut, he growled out, making her clamp even tighter onto him. I'm your chubby slut. Please fill me up. Ms. Cake ed out as she loved the feeling of him dominating her. It made her feel like she was a young mare again. Though she knew no mare has ever felt this ever before, and she was ecstatic that she was the first to feel it that she knew of. She didn't even notice that Naruto fed her back onto her back until he captured her in a that she ed into. She didn't mind being fed over back and forth as long as he stayed her. Your whole body is just so why, he whispered huskily into her ear as she let out as he groped her teats. From these glorious soft and large teats, to your soft belly, plump and unbelievably soft ass, to your tight is all too much, as you can feel how my is reacting to it, he said as he squeezed her ass hard while continuing to his into her. I'm so happy your loves my body. It's making me so close to Ming again. I can't take it. It's too much. She ed out as he spanked her ass, making her even louder. And just imagine if I had been able to plow your ass as well, I would have conquered 2 of your holes besides your pretty mouth. I guess I'll be satisfied painting one of them white, he growled out as Ms. Cake could only lie there and as he continued to into her. She could feel her consciousness spin, but she couldn't help but think how this male, who she had only known for a few months, was giving her the best of her life right here on the counter of her kitchen. The taboo and dirtiness of it all only worked to heighten her quickly arriving. I'm going to. Please don't you dare stop. She ed out as she panted with half-lidded eyes. I'm going to too. Take my and get pregnant. You are my mare. This body is made for my only. He growled out, feeling his own rising, and before Miss Cake could agree with her new lover, she was silenced by the of him picking up the speed and depth before slamming her ass against him. She widened her eyes and let out a gasp as she came hard just as he started to send his hot into her. Her gasp became a whimpering as, to both of their surprise, the part of his that she had noticed to have a round bulge started to expand in her marehood. As her tore through her, causing her to let out a loud scream, like the increasing with wave after wave of she could feel filling her up, and she continued to squirt. The fact that his had swelled in her and was keeping all the her only made the increase. Plus the fact Naruto continued to hump her, pushing his slightly further into her as he held her hips. That, and how he even started to grab her ass right over her cutie mark, made the sore even more, as a mare's cutie mark was highly sensitive. Her eyes were wide as her stomach started to bulge slightly from the amount of filling her, which was a very difficult an amazing thing. No more, no more. I can't take any more, Ms. Cake muttered as she saw her belly increase a bit more with tears from the powerful and slightly scary still tearing through her, as she still was ming from it all. She was afraid, and slightly excited. If he continued she'd break from all the "I am pregnant now. I'm sure of it," she thought before she passed out from the not caring that Naruto was still nodded of her. Naruto groaned as his ran its course. The being amazing for him and helping clear his head halfway while he could still go on the fact that his partner passed out meant he couldn't. His eyes widened at the tears on her face, instantly afraid he went too far before pulling out once his member allowed him to. He was a bit turned on to see all of his pour and leak out of her, but it also made him feel that much guiltier. Lemon end. He had taken advantage of such a nice mare that let him live with her. Let's get you to bed and clean up, at least, Naruto thought with a frown, as that was the least he could do after everything he had done to her. As he gently carried her up to the bathroom, having a clone quickly mop up and another to finish the dough and icing like intended, as he gently entered the shower with her. The hot water had no effect on her, as he felt a bit off washing her, but he kind of had to clean her up and wash himself of her scent that basically covered him due to how much of a squirter she was. Thankfully it didn't take too long, and after drying them both off, her more than him at the time, he was able to set her down in her bed. "I'm sorry, Ms. Cake. I understand if you hate me and if you can hear me and want me to move out or, I don't know, report me, then go ahead," Naruto said before he left the room with a sigh. Ms. Cake, though, just as Naruto left, started to frown as she tossed and turned a bit. "I'm a slutty mare," she mumbled out repeatedly in her sleep with a frown as the burning heat her was gone. Naruto didn't hear any of it, as he had already made his way down to the shop, only to somewhat panic as Ai hopped into the house. "Oh, hi Naruto. Feeling better?" Ai said with a happy smile that made Naruto frown a bit at. "Yeah, Ms. Cake called for me to help with some icing as she needed some dough, but she kind of had to lay down," he said as Ai frowned worriedly. "Oh really? Is she okay?" Ai asked with a somewhat worried tone as Naruto nodded. "Yeah, I helped her get up to her bed and made her lay down, while my clones finished things up," he added before rubbing the back of his neck. "And actually I'm going to head to bed really early tonight. My clones can still help if you need them," he added, as he really just wanted to go down to his room and avoid them for a while. "They should be able to handle it, so no worries." "I hope you feel better," Ai said as Naruto nodded, and she watched Naruto head down to his room. As Naruto lay down on his bed, he couldn't help but frown as he buried his head under his pillow, as he was so conflicted. A part of him was glad he got some relief and release, as it cleared up his head quite a lot, but the larger part was upset because of how he got it. He had not only basically forced himself on Ms. Cake, but also had been way too rough with her to the point she passed out, to where the hot water of the shower hadn't stirred her. He was afraid that he might have broken some of the bonds he had made in this town so far because he couldn't control himself. Ms. Cake, Ai, and who knows how many others would see him as some horny animal that forced himself on Mares if they learned about what he had done. "I just need to stay away from Mares until I find some way to control this new part of me," he thought with a sigh before he decided he'd figure it out more in the morning. A week later. Naruto sighed as laid hidden in one of the many trees in Sweet Apple Acres, trying to avoid Mares as best as he could while clones worked around town, and so far it was about the same as he had been. It wasn't even just Mares being close that got him hot under the collar, as the same effect happened by just their lingering sense. It ended making dispelling his clones at the end of the day even worse for him from having all the reactions of all of his clones to various Mares hit him all at once. So far he was managing just barely by avoiding them as best he could with his real self, since reacting to it directly made things much worse. But even he knew he could only avoid them for so long. He still felt terrible about what he did to Ms. Cake, and honestly he was afraid to talk to her. She hadn't yelled at him or anything, but every time she looked at him she only did so for a brief second before turning her eyes elsewhere. And honestly he didn't blame her for it, considering what he had done to her. So far he has tried everything he knew to help himself, from meditation to training and even just exercise, but absolutely nothing worked, and he could only make up excuses to stay away from Ms. Cake for only so long. Plus he needed to find some solution, as even Sweet Apple Acres wasn't as safe as he thought it would, considering the smell of apples overpowering everything should be helping. While it did help somewhat, the sight of Applejack rinsing herself off with a hose definitely wasn't. He tried not to stare, but with everything else getting under his collar, so to speak, His eyes couldn't look away no matter how hard he was trying, since Applejack looked amazing while her coat looked amazing as it was matted against her body from the water. Her hair and tail let out of their ponytails and both stuck to her body and ping. It especially made her flank look amazing as her tail stuck to it and showed off her cheeks, which, as he was looking intently at it for the first time, allowed him to see how she had blonde freckles scattered across her flank as well. Why is it every time I am trying to stay calm I see stuff this amazing, he thought with a groan as he quickly tried to shake it out of his head, already noticing he was starting to pant a bit. What you doing? A familiar voice asked out before he felt a figure fall down onto his back, and he looked back to see a very familiar pony smiling at him. This though thankfully allowed him to tear his eyes away from the pink mare in front of the barn. Prai? How did you find me? Naruto asked as the mare had appeared suddenly, and seemingly out of nowhere. I just felt you might be hiding here since you've been running away a lot. I had to check a lot of trees though before I finally found you, Ai said as she wrapped her arms around his neck with a smile and hugged him tightly, pressing her body against his teats and all. Kai, can you not hug me so tight? He asked as her teats being pressed against him was really not helping him at all. No. You've been avoiding me and every pony so much recently. What is wrong, Naruto? She asked as Naruto sighed and looked away from her. I'm sorry, it's just I am trying to get control over something that is a bit dangerous, he said as Ai whined and set her head on top of his. You don't have to do it alone though. You should let some pony help you, as there are ponies that care and will be willing to help you, Ai said as Naruto frowned a bit. While as sweet as that sounded, it didn't work too well with his problem. With my problem, having others help might make things worse. Thank you for worrying though, he said as he patted her on the head, making the mare smile before she had the top of his head. Of course, you're my friend. I hope you can find help soon, she said before she gave him one last tight hug, which he swore he felt her grind against him for the briefest second before the mare leapt off him and disappeared. He let out a slight sigh at Ai's sudden arrival and disappearance, chalking it up to one of the mysteries that makes Ai unique, as well as her advice. I honestly don't think there is anyone who can help. I mean, any doctor would be unsure given how I'm the only fox here, and I think I'm too unique for a vet to be of help, he thought as he frowned and looked up at the sky. And I doubt going to Celestia will do me any good, since if she learned what I did she might banish me for taking advantage of Ms. Cake like that, but I'm reaching my wit's end, he continued before sighing and flinching as two clones dispelled after they finished their jobs there, crashing back into him as one had been flashed by a clumsy mare and the other was surrounded by Maras. I can't handle this, maybe I do need help with someone to talk to, Naruto thought as he was honestly running out of options. Might as well go to where an open offer to talk is available, he added before he leapt off the tree he was on, and quickly made his way back towards town. Town Hall. Naruto was a bit worried about coming here honestly as he followed Mayor Mare's secretary towards her office. He didn't know if Mayor Mare would be able to help, but she did tell him to come to her if he needed anything, and honestly he had nowhere else to go in town besides her, as with her being the mayor of the town she might know. And if worst came to worst, then he figured he could always just move out of town past where Fluttershy lived, as he had already made trips into Everfree Forest, and the creatures, it didn't bother him. Plus that way he wouldn't be a danger to the Maras and possibly hurt them because of his lack of control. Oh Naruto! What do I owe this? Mayor Mare asked with a smile before the secretary left them, and she motioned for him to enter and sit down. Well, I kind of need help, and I figured you might be the only one to help right now, besides Celestia. Although I feel like she's the more dangerous choice, he said as the mayor frowned and nodded. Please tell me what is bothering you so I can see if I can be of help, Mayor Mare said as she gave him a reassuring smile before he sighed. Well, I've been having troubles. You see, my nose is strong, like crazy strong, and when I'm around Maras I don't smell them. At first it didn't bother me, but now it is making me, he tried to say before he buried his face in his hand. I really didn't think it'd be this embarrassing to say, he said before Mayor Mare smiled softly at him. Don't be embarrassed. I might be an old mare, but I like to think I am easy to talk to, she said as he cleared his with a frown. You aren't old looking at all. I mean, you look so young with your amazing shade of silver hair, he said, making the mayor blush and giggle. Oh my, aren't you the sweetest, but I don't think you came here just to compliment me, she said before he groaned and covered his face. See, this is the problem I'm having. When I'm around Maras and pick up on their sense, it gets mehit and bothered. I've tried to keep a level head, but I still do stuff like flirting or worse, he said as he looked away from Mayor Mare, who was silent as she listened to him. About a week ago it got really bad. Like extra bad, where everything was just making me worse, and I ended up forcing myself onto a mare. I mean, I actually had with them to the point they kind of passed out, he said, grateful that his fur was hiding his blush rather well before he was taken aback as mare started to giggle. Oh my, you had me worried there for a moment, Naruto. I thought you had murdered some pony with how serious you sounded, she said as Naruto frowned at her. But I forced myself on a mare, he said, trying to stress the point as mare nodded. Yes, and that would be bad, if the mare actually reported it. You said it has been a week since then and my office hasn't gotten any report. And trust me, in a town heavily populated by maras we react fast to stuff like this, as heavily rare as it is, she said as Naruto frowned and looked down before mare held her hoof out to get his attention. But if you still feel bad about it, I recommend talking to this mare. See how she feels about it after the fact. Though I doubt she will be too upset about it, she added before he nodded, a slight frown still on his face. But why are you acting so calm when I said I lost control? Shouldn't you be more worried? He asked before mare waved him off with her hoof. Honestly, Celestia expected this situation to happen, but not for a while longer, she said before frowning at his confused expression. You see, she figured, after reading over my copy of Fluttershy's notes on your biology, that you had some similarities to dragons in terms of how they are very yearly active when they are of age, as they tend to release pheromones to attract partners and react to pheromones around them. Fluttershy mentioned how animals tend to act out around you at times, the males acting submissive and the females presenting. So Celestia told me should there be a time you started showing signs to help you and to explain things like how is probably different to Maras than you are used to, mare said with a smile that made Naruto feel better, that at least, as far as it seemed, Ms. Cake wasn't going to report him, but it all depended on how it went when he talked with her. You see, Naruto, for some Maras is probably different than you are used to. They mainly use it as a way to reproduce since birth rates have been declining recently. Plus, added with the lack of stallions, and the fact the number of sterile ones are going up, makes it where most Maras are much more open to quick to try for kids, she said as Naruto frowned as to him, that sounded wrong. Really? So it's just get on and just do it quickly for kids? He asked as mare frowned and nodded. That is ridiculous. It's supposed to be passionate and full of. It's a way to bond with your partner but also be fun. A guy really shouldn't just hop on and do a few but instead do everything he can to please the mare until she is gushing like crazy. At least that's what I did with the mare I was with, he said, quickly finding himself embarrassed by how mare was looking at him with a blush on her face before she cleared her into her hoof. Well, some married couples do it for more, but still not to the extent you mentioned from what I've heard among some gossipy Maras. But still, this system favors young Maras since most stallions prefer to go after them than ones my age, she said with a sigh as Naruto scoffed and rolled his eyes. That's crazy. Maras like you are just as if not more so, than younger ones. I mean, they are more mature and developed, he said as the mayor giggled with a smile. I am happy to hear Sub-Pony has eyes for Maras like myself. Though I am quite curious why you think so, as it is quite uncommon. What makes, as a random example, an older mare like myself why to you? She asked as she stood up and started to walk out from behind her desk. Well, Naruto said as he watched as the mayor started to walk around him with a sway to her hips, I would have to say your short mane as well as your figure first, he finished as she walked behind him, fing her tail enough to give him the briefest flash of what was hidden underneath. Mare couldn't hide her smirk as Naruto's eyes were locked onto her flank as she continued to walk around him. In all honesty, she was absolutely loving the way he was looking at her, as it was something she hadn't felt in years. Even back then it wasn't nearly as intense as Naruto was looking at her right now. It made her shiver as he had such an intense, passionate, and wild look in his eyes, as if he was about to pounce on her at any second. And she absolutely loved it. I'm so glad you like my mane since I don't get it styled. But I am even more curious what you mean about my figure, she said as she stopped in front of him, her flank closest to him before she swayed it slightly and turning around to give him a view of her full body. Well, your flank is very lovely. It looks very soft yet firm, Naruto said as he started to pant softly as mare smiled and turned back around to him a better view as she looked over her shoulder at it. Really? I always thought it looked too small. You don't think it's too small? She asked as she shook it a bit before he shook his head. Lemon start. It looks bubbly and lovely, he said as he reached forward, making mare bite her as his hands grabbed it, and one of his tails lifted up her tail to expose her marehood. Her S were slightly parted, a darker color than the rest of her coat with a hard nub at the top of it hidden at the top of it. All that paired with the slight nest to it made the scent dizzying to him. Your flank does feel very nice and soft and firm like I thought. A perfect handful with my smaller form, he whispered as he gave it a squeeze, making her giggle. What about my marehood? Does it look good to you? She asked as he nodded and used his thumbs to part her S more, making her as he smiled. She couldn't help but pant a bit in excitement as she remembered what he said about how should make his partner feel, and she wanted to experience it all. It feels so soft and looks very why, he said as she was looking back at him, biting her and letting out a soft whimpering as his thumbs opened and closed her marehood before running his thumbs over it. This minimal attention was already a lot to her, as the only thing to touch her marehood for the last several years was her own hoof, and so far just his thumbs were feeling much better than that. And it's so, you must be a really naughty mare, he teased as she nodded excitedly. I'm very naughty, why don't you punish me, bad colt, she purred out as he smiled and spread her S again, making her giggle as she looked at him. Naruto smiled as he inspected the mare's marehood, mainly to tease her as barely even let the S of his thumbs enter her, and from the whining she was doing it was definitely working. Her was much different than Ms. Cake's, mainly since her S weren't as puffy, but as he looked at the top of it he noticed the main difference. What do we have here? Naruto asked as he moved his head down and used one to softly trace his over mare's rather large, easily 1 to 1.5 inch, clit, which instantly made Mare gasp and bite her. See, this is another part of you that makes you very why and incredibly fun to play and please, he whispered out as she blushed as she was rather embarrassed of that part of her. Really? She asked as she had only really touched it herself due to how stallions, like she had told Naruto, were very quick in terms of. Of course. Here, let me show you, he said as he looked her in the eyes, making her shiver from the passion in them, before he leaned closer to her marehood and started to it up and down. Mare couldn't hold in her S as she shivered and gasped from how he was not only assaulting her clit with his tongue but his hands were groping and playing with her flank. She had never felt hands before now, but she was in love with them for how they griped her flank and toyed with it. That, paired with the effects on her clit, made the older mare come to her fastest ever before she started to over his face. This though didn't deter him, as if anything he started to assault her even harder by ing and nibbling on her clit, causing her legs to give in as she came. Her flank was left up in the air due to Naruto still holding it in his hands, and her face was on the floor. If what you have planned next is as amazing as that, I can't wait. I never knew you could do those kinds of dirty things or how amazing they felt. If you did this with the mare you mentioned, there is no way she'd be mad, Mare said as Naruto smiled before the mare noticed how she was laying down on her desk. Are we going to do the deed next? She asked with excitement in her tone as he ran his hands down her hind legs. Wait and see, my dear. Let me enjoy this body of yours. Like these why little teats of yours, he said as he gave her a soft pinch, making her gasp and softly. Her teats were smaller than I's and Ms. Cake's, but they were still a nice size and ped with 2 dark brown S. He smiled as he squeezed them before softly at each of hers, causing the silver-haired mare to softly. I'm going to show you everything that you ponies neglect to do and what you have been missing out on, he whispered out with a growl, making Mare shiver with a smile, before he lifted up her legs. She felt herself get even ter as he pinned her hind legs up towards her head with his tails before watching him lean back down between them. She felt like she was in heaven as his tongue worked its magic by ing over and into her marehood, even teasing and playing with her still sensitive clit. Naruto, though, much to her annoyance, stopped and pulled back just as she was starting to edge closer to him. Can't have you ming this early, my dear Mare, as you see, Naruto said as he stood up and allowed Mare to see his hardened member that stood at attention. This is where the main event starts, he growled out as Mare was basically drooling a bit at the sight of what she knew would be impaling her very soon. Oh my, this energetic for an old mare like me? Mare teased as she watching him line himself up with her, sharply inhaling a breath as she felt his graze against her S. Oh, stop with this old mare stuff, you are much more of a young beauty in my eyes, my dear, Naruto said as he leaned forward, capturing the blushing mare's S in a deep as he started to rub his up and down her marehood S. He made sure to go out of his way to stroke against her engorged clit, which she responded to greatly from the feeling of his hot member press against her sensitive nub that, before now, only she had shown attention to. Mare was a bit taken aback by the, having not expected it, and definitely not in the intensity that Naruto was giving to her, but loved it as his tongue invaded her mouth. She could only let out S into his mouth, as his scorching hot member teased her marehood as if to say, "This will be mine and I intend to play with it fully." "And now," Naruto said as he broke with his hands on her flank to mark my claim, he whispered out before pressing his against her moist opening of her marehood. He smiled as he had hard into her, enjoying the unsharp gasp she let out from his member piercing her. Her marehood, as he expected, felt different from Ms. Cake's, but it was definitely just as satisfying to sheath himself in. Hers was much to which made it feel even softer when it clung onto him. "How does it feel to have me and you, you on top of your own desk like this while on your back showing me all your private areas?" He whispered out as Mayor smiled and looked up at him with half-lidded eyes, her legs now placed over his shoulders to let her feel not so bound up. He was definitely enjoying the somewhat dumb look on her face, as he could tell just into her was enjoyed to bring her close to him, the clearest sign being how her legs were starting to twitch. "It feels so amazing. I haven't been filled up like this in years, and yours feels so much better than the few I've had," she purred out as she bit her, and let out a whimper as she felt him give a quick in and out of her. "Oh Faust, it's hitting so many spots," she said in a dreamy tone, while Naruto smiled. "I aim to please and trust me, I intend to," Naruto said in a growl that made Mayor feel giddy before Naruto gripped her flank and started to in and out of the silver-haired mare in front of him. Mayor, unlike Ms. Cake was at first, was very vocal as she added and panted with each into her. "Faust! I am Ming already, you stallion!" she screamed out as Naruto smirked, already liking how sensitive this mare was and how easy it was to send her over the edge. "For me, I'll just keep you as you," he whispered out in her ear. His husky tone paired with a quick squeeze of her clit with 2s was more than enough to send her over the edge. Mare, for the first time in her adult life, felt a powerful tear through her that, much to her embarrassment, reduced her to a squirting mess. She didn't know she was actually a squirter, as even the S she experienced with her own hoof weren't anywhere this powerful. She was a bit embarrassed by the amount of liquid she could feel herself squirting onto Naruto, and most likely her desk. Though her embarrassment was quickly erased by as he was still his in her, having picked up speed and force that was prolonging her, that was making her stick her tongue with a slightly dumb look on her face. Naruto smiled as he softly turned her onto her side, his member still her, before he lifted up one of her legs. "Don't pass out on me just yet, cause I want to make sure you feel every moment of it," he said as he started to again into her, making Mayor let out a quivering. "Oh Faust, you are hitting spots in me I never thought were possibly," Mayor ed out as with every into her she felt his member hit places that were honestly making her see stars. "You really know how to show a mare a good time," she teased out before gasping as his hand squeezed her clit again. "This is just the beginning, we still have much more to go before we finish," he whispered as Mayor's eyes widened as she looked down to see the bulge in her stomach from his start to grow bigger. "And Naruto, oh Faust, it's too big, sweetie," she whimpered as while she might like being stuffed, there was a limit to it. "I'm sorry, I kind of got too excited," he said with a slight frown as he rubbed the back of his head before Mayor giggled and rubbed his hand that was on her flank. "It's alright, sweetie, but how about you finish what you started?" Mayor purred out as she wiggled her hips, causing his to stir around her. "That was always the plan," he said before he started hard into her again, making her with a smile as she was loving the feeling of it moving her. "Oh sweetie, yours the perfect size for me," she ed out as she continued to roll her hips as best as she could under all the to ensure it continued to stir her up more and more. "And your feels perfect around it like it was made for my," he whispered back in her ear, making her shiver and drool a bit more, before he reached down and rolled her clit in between his S. Mayor had honestly lost count of the times she had, from his and his constant attention on her clit, and she was absolutely loving it. It was so rare for a mare to have an, let alone several like Naruto had given her, and much rarer that it took this long for a mare's partner to finish. "SS sweetie, I can't take much more. I swear I'm about to pass out from Ming," so much she whined out as she wanted more but knew her body was at its limit. "I'm getting close too, but I still want to have one last bit of fun and try something out," he whispered in her ear before he surprised her by picking her up, his member still deep of her, and sitting down on her chair with her positioned on top of him. Mayor bit her, as she felt his member slide a bit deeper of her due to her sitting on top of him, and her weight pulling her down. "I want you to ride me," he said with a smile as he ran his hands over her flank. "Ride you? What does that mean?" Mayor asked as Naruto remembered Mares only really did it in one style, so this was very new to her. "Here, like this," he said as he slowly lifted her up off his member, ignoring her whines before he pushed her back down once his was the last part still in her. You go up and down, bouncing on my. This way it goes even deeper in you, he added as he rubbed her stomach over the outline his was causing. She blushed a bit but didn't waste much time before she started to move herself up and down, as each time she fell down his did its way into her. Slowly, once she got the hang of it, she started to pick up the speed a lot more while Naruto's hands groped and played with her flank. You look so why right now, Mayor, your hair a mess and your collar undone as you ride and bounce on my. I can't wait to fill you to the brim, he growled out as he gripped her flank harder, making her quickly ride faster. He enjoyed the position he was in as he had on her neck, liking the sight of the mayor's glistening body riding on top of him. Oh Faust, I'm so close. I want it so badly. She had out as she moved down on his only to let out a startled gasp as he had up to meet her, causing his to spear itself into her. Naruto could feel himself getting closer and closer to Ming as Mayor continued to ride him with him up to meet her descent each time, and continuously piercing her to the point it was open and accepting to his head. Mayor, you look so beautiful as you ride my. I swear you look as beautiful as Celestia right now, he whispered as Mayor blushed dark before speeding up. She was a bit stunned by his words but overjoyed by them as honestly, she thought her prime had passed. She thought she wouldn't be able to find a stallion to be with or even experience something this amazing, with some pony like Naruto no less. His words meant the world to her, as she quickly launched her mouth towards his, catching it and trying her best to copy the kind of Naruto showed her. Her hips were going fast as she could make them go as she was doing a mix of riding him and what felt like humping him. His hands though were traveling all over her body, groping and squeezing every inch of her toned flank while continuing to push her down and up at her to add more force to it all. Naruto was fully enjoying Mayor's body as, unlike his first time, he was more in control and didn't have anything nagging at him to say how bad it was that he was taking advantage of her like Ms. Cake. It fully allowed him to enjoy the experience, and of having with a mare. He could fill her up, and not feel guilty afterwards, so he was making sure to go as full out as he could go with Mayor. And Mayor definitely felt his passion as her body felt like it was on fire from everything she was feeling. She honestly loved it as she could feel the strongest of the night build up her. Oh Faust Naruto, I'm so close, please paint my white, Mayor purred out as she panted into his ear, which set Naruto off. Mayor could only let out a loud screaming as she felt him jackhammer her down onto his hands gripping her flank hard. She widened her eyes in shock as she felt two of his slide into her asshole, which caused her to clamp down on him tightly. Mayor let out her loudest of the session as Naruto grunted loudly while the two of them came together. Mayor didn't even care as she squirted all over his and crotch as she felt something swell her and scorching hot liquid start to fill her up. She could only watch in a mix of shock and ecstasy as she watched her stomach start to inflate from all that she could feel filling her up. Amazing. Why you really are filling me up. Why you were fantastic, dear, Mayor stuttered out in an utterly tired tone as he body spasmed softly after each spurt of he added her. She was surprised why none of it was leaking out considering how much he was pouring into her, but figured it had to do something with his swelling her instead of shrinking down like stallions did when they were done. She really liked the new feeling as she loved that his hot was still her and keeping her belly warm. Naruto could only nod as he rested his head on top of Mayor's head as she laid on his. He panted a bit as his finally ended, Mayor's belly still inflated as his knot kept it all her. He did frown a bit as he noticed two of his were the ass of the sleeping mare on his before he slowly pulled them out, only getting a small grunt from her before she stirred in her sleep a bit. Water, Mayor sleepily grunted out as Naruto figured she had to be a bit dehydrated from how much she squirted before he used his tails to grab a water bottle from a nearby mini fridge, open it, and help the tired Mayor on his lap drink it down. He wasn't quite sure when, but sometime after he found himself joining Mayor in her sleep as having a mare cuddle up to him in the afterglow of was very relaxing. Lemon and unknown to either of them, as they slept, Mayor's secretary d her head in as she had heard everything as with only being room away it was impossible not to. Especially considering how loud her boss had been. The secretary blushed a bit as she was hit in the face by the smell of and the heat of the room. She is so lucky she pays me well and that working here isn't a bother. Guess I'll have to clear her schedule, she thought as she blushed a bit, curious as to how good it actually felt to be with Naruto considering how much her boss ed and screamed. She was a bit confused about how her boss seemed to be on Naruto's lap, never having heard of that being a mating style, but figured she'd get an answer from her boss later as she closed the door. Naruto was the first to wake up, figuring by how the sun was setting that they had been asleep for a few hours. He couldn't help but smile as he noticed Mare still asleep on a smile on her face as she nuzzled up to him. Being careful as she slept, he gently at her forehead and neck while his hands stroked her back, making sure to wake her up as gently and sweetly as possible. "Did you have a good nap there?" he teased as she smiled up at him. "You're still here," she said softly with a smile as he pet her head. "Of course I'd still be here. There is no way I'd just up and leave like that while you sleep after what we just did together," he said as Mare smiled happily, touched by his words and that he wasn't just focused on like some stallions were. "Can I get another one of those special yes?" "I really enjoyed those," Mare said as he smiled and leaned forward to capture her S in a French. Once it ended, she smiled and nuzzled back against his with a smile as she enjoyed the sound of the heartbeat she fell asleep to, and he enjoyed how warm and soft she was in his arms. He quickly found his hands quickly back on her flank as honestly he really liked the feel of it. "Seems you can't get enough of my body? Glad to see how you acted wasn't all in the moment," she said as she smiled as he softly massaged and rubbed her flank. "I can never get tired of your amazing body, especially after I enjoyed it so much," he said with a smile as he ran on each hand over the cutie mark on both of her cheeks, making the mare shiver a bit as she looked up at him. "Just so you know, touching a mare's cutie mark is a very intimate thing, sweetie," she said as he frowned and looked at her. "Well, can I keep touching yours?" he asked while she rolled her eyes and smirked up at him. "After everything we did, it'd be weird if I didn't allow you," she said before she leaned up and gave him a quick and soft peck on the S. "But as much as I would love to stay here and enjoying being on top of you, I think we both need to clean up," she said as she was sticky with sweat while he was sticky because of her spray. "Yeah, though first we need to, well, separate," he said with a blush as Mare could still feel her. His length had shrunk, but she found herself still plugged up. Seeing as I don't want to leave a trail of it on my floor, could you be a sweetie and carry me there?" she asked as he chuckled and at the top of her head. "Sure thing, wouldn't want to make more of a mess of your office," he said as he stood up, using his tails to keep her up against him, and made his way towards the bathroom that was connected to her office. He was careful not to let himself pull out of her as he made his way to the bathroom, but he was having a bit of troubles considering how with each step she squeezed him slightly. A part of him really wanted to a bit, but he knew Mare was done for now, making this quite torturous to him. "Are you really getting turned on again?" Mare asked as she looked up at him, already feeling him harden up a bit her. "Sorry, it's just I'm still in you and you are squeezing me with every step," he said with a sheepish grin before she smiled up at him. "You are such a pervy fox, aren't you?" she teased while chuckled and smirked down at her. "For beautiful Mares like you?" "Yes," he said before they entered the bathroom, and he carefully stepped into the rather large bath she had in it. They both let out a shiver as he pulled out of her, his member going back into him, while they both watched his pour out of her and into the tub. Mare was shocked to see how much was actually pouring out of her, which she quickly remembered how all of this was sealed up in her for hours. "I really need to go see Nurse Redheart if I am with full now," Mare thought with a smile as she was actually excited about the prospect of it. Naruto though couldn't help but find himself a bit turned on as he watched it pour out of her while she splashed some water in between her hind legs to help wash it down. "Not so fast, mister," down she teased with a splash of water. "Sorry, just I didn't expect watching that to be so well hot," he said as she rolled her eyes with a smile. "If you are going to take a bath with me to wash off none of that, my body is still really tired from what you gave me," she teased before he held his hand up. "I promise I will try my best not to get turned on by you. It'll be hard, but I won't tire you out with another rud," he said as she nodded before she started to fill up the tub with warm water. The bath was incredibly relaxing for the both of them after their escapades. Naruto helped Mare wash off and even just relax together in hot water, her resting with her back against his. Sadly though, as much as Mare would have loved it, they had to get out. "I'm sorry that I have to go, Mare," he said as he watched her put back on her collar and necktie while she made her way back behind her desk. "It's alright, sweetie, as I do have a town to run, and you probably need to return home yourself. Though I will definitely see you again," she said with a kind smile before he nodded and walked over to behind the desk. "Of course you'll see me again," he said as he gave her one last and Mare watched with a smile as he left her office. "Good to see you are awake now," Mare's secretary said as she walked into the room a minute or so after Naruto had left. I came in to check on you earlier because of the sounds I heard and found the two of you passed out, she said, while Mayor at least had the decency to blush a bit. Was it really that good for you to make all those sounds? She asked before Mayor let out a dreamy sigh before she rested her head on her hooves. All that and more. Here I'm starving after all of that, so why don't we get some food and I'll tell you everything, Mayor said as her secretary blushed softly but nodded and followed, as she was very curious about her boss's time with the most unique citizen of Ponyville. Naruto was rather deep in thought as he walked down the basically empty street, as it was getting rather late out. His mind was busy thinking about his amazing time he just shared with the mayor and everything she told him about how intimacy worked with ponies, as well as what Celestia had figured about his new body thanks to Fluttershy. Right now he just wanted to get a chance to talk with Cup about what had happened when he lost control that first time. He fully planned to throw himself at her mercy and apologize for what he did. He didn't feel too afraid of the outcome given she hadn't reported him yet, but still he wanted to apologize while he hoped she didn't hate him or wasn't afraid of him. Though as he entered Sugarcube Corner he figured, as everything was turned off, he'd have to wait for his chance to talk with her tomorrow. That was until he made his way down to his room to find the mayor on his mind sitting on his bed. She though was quick to get off it as she noticed he entered the room. "Oh good, you're home? I've been wanting to talk to you," Ms. Cake said with a soft blush on her cheeks before Naruto frowned and walked a bit into his room. "First things first, I want to apologize. I never meant to force myself on you. I am new to being around ponies and I know this doesn't excuse me at all, but I just wanted to. You don't have to apologize," Ms. Cake said as she silenced him by gently putting her hoof to his snout. "Naruto, please just sit next to me for a second and let me say something first," Ms. Cake said as she sat back down on his bed before patting the area next to her, which he slowly sat down at, a bit unsure how things were about to go. "I'm not mad at you, Naruto, for what happened in the kitchen between the two of us. Surprised, very much so, but if I'm being fully honest, I didn't hate it, and I enjoyed it a lot actually," Ms. Cake said with a very dark blush on her face while Naruto looked at her very surprised. "In fact, it probably was so much more powerful since I haven't been intimate with some pony in a very long time," she added as that made him more confused than anything. "Wait, seriously? You haven't been intimate with someone? How could you not?" given he said, his eyes trailing to her rear before he stopped his train of thought due to not wanting to seem like a pervert, although Ms. Cake couldn't help but smile at it. "Why thank you, something like that really means a lot to a mare like me. It's just that when a mare reaches my age we aren't really viewed as possible mates. Hence why your words and actions really meant more than you know to me," she explained, still blushing as she looked at him. "You made me feel like an attractive young mare again," she added with a giggle. "Still, I am sorry I forced myself on you like that," he said, still feeling like he needed to tell her that. "It is quite okay, as I found it rather exciting. Plus I felt, even in that state you were in, you wouldn't hurt me," she said, putting her hoof over his hand with a smile. "Now look, there will have to be some rules if we are to fool around, mister," she said, looking at him with a playful, serious look in her eyes. "That means no doing anything while we have customers or when IE is around. Last thing I want is for others to catch us in the act," she said, a dark blush on her cheeks to show it wasn't out of being ashamed but more out of being utterly embarrassed, which he found made her look even cuter. "I promise I'll do my very best to keep my hands off you during business hours, although at times it will be hard," he said as chuckling a bit as he ran over the ass, making her shiver and nod shakily as he ran his over her cutie mark. "Then how about point one of those yes you gave me to, you know, seal the deal," she said nervously before Naruto smiled and tilted her head up so she was looking at him. "Of course, Cup," he whispered out as he captured her S in a deep, his hands sliding there down her sides before resting on her flank. He couldn't help but deepen the before he found himself somewhat hunched over Ms. Cake as she was now lying on her back on his bed, who seemed a bit surprised by her new position but made no attempt to pull away or stop the continued as he continued to invade her mouth with his tongue until drool was running out of both of their mouths. As the long and passionate ed ended, both of them were panting a bit, clear in Cup's eyes as well as his own. His was going overdrive as he watched her drool and pant on her back, her looking like a plump treat ready for him to devour. "How about we seal the deal the real way?" he asked as she blushed before nodding shyly before she let out a squeal as he pounced on her. Life for Naruto was odd in Ponyville, but as things started to change and shape differently in his new life, he honestly liked it. It was welcomed, especially if it meant he got closer to beautiful Mares. Thanks for watching this video. You really enjoy this video. Like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. Don't forget to support and follow Moretsuna Sora for writing that awesome fanfic, and also make sure to comment on this story, link in the description. See you in the next video. Goodbye.